Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into the world of database programming. We're going to be looking at two of the real heavyweights, Microsoft's T-SQL and Oracle's PL/SQL. So if you've ever felt like standard SQL just isn't cutting it, you are definitely in the right place.
So have you ever been there? You're writing a query, and you just think to yourself, man, I really wish I could just use an if statement here. Or, you know what would make this so much easier? A loop. If you're building any kind of complex application logic, I'm willing to bet you've hit that ceiling of what standard SQL can do all by itself.
And really, that's the heart of the problem. Standard SQL is amazing for what it does, fetching, inserting, updating, and deleting data. You tell it what you want, but it doesn't really have the tools for procedural logic. You don't get variables or loops or good solid error handling. That's exactly where these procedural extensions come in. They let you write a full-blown script that tells the database how to get something done, step by step.
All right, first up, we've got T-SQL. It stands for Transact SQL, and it's basically Microsoft's solution to this whole problem. It's the language of SQL Server and Azure SQL Database, and it pretty much adds a whole toolkit of programming superpowers right into your SQL. So let's take a quick look at a really simple T-SQL loop. As you can see, it starts with the declare keyword to create a variable. In this case, it's @counter. Then you've got a while block that sets up the condition for the loop. And all the logic, like printing something or incrementing that counter, would go right inside that begin-end block. Pretty straightforward.
Now, on the other side of the coin, we have PL/SQL. That stands for Procedural Language/SQL. And this is Oracle's own proprietary extension. It does the exact same job as T-SQL, letting you write complex stuff like stored procedures and triggers, but it is built to work exclusively with the Oracle database.
And here's how PL/SQL would handle that same loop. You can see it's a little different. Instead of having to declare and manually increment a counter, PL/SQL has this really clean for loop syntax. The block starts, it loops from 1 to 3 automatically, and then it ends. It's just a more concise way to get to the very same result.
You know, the absolute best way to think about these two is to compare them to something like C# versus Java. They're both incredibly powerful languages, right? They solve similar problems, but they are built for totally different ecosystems. You can't just run C# code on a Java virtual machine, and you absolutely cannot run T-SQL on an Oracle database. They are fundamentally tied to their home platforms.
And those differences show up in the syntax. They might look subtle, but trust me, they're important. In T-SQL, variables always start with that @ symbol. In PL/SQL, nope, you just give it a name. For joining strings together, T-SQL uses a simple plus sign. PL/SQL uses those double pipes. And for something critical like error handling, T-SQL uses a try-catch block, while PL/SQL uses something called an exception block.
Now, that's a question I hear a lot. People hear procedural SQL and their brains immediately jump to stored procedures. And yeah, that's a huge part of it for sure. But what they can do goes way, way beyond that.
I mean, both languages can be used to build user-defined functions, triggers that fire on database events, and you can just run direct scripts with them. But PL/SQL has a couple of really cool, unique ideas. One is packages, which let you bundle related code together into a neat little unit. The other is anonymous blocks. These are basically one-off scripts you can run on the fly, which is perfect for quick admin tasks or testing.
Okay, let's talk about something that trips up a lot of developers, especially if you're new to the enterprise world. You might log into a Linux server and see PL/SQL code all over the place. And so you might think, oh, okay, PL/SQL must be a Linux thing. But is that really the case?
Well, this brings us to a really common myth, that PL/SQL is some kind of Linux language. The truth is a little more nuanced. The reality is that Oracle Database, the system that uses PL/SQL, is just most often deployed on Linux servers, so the language itself isn't tied to the OS, but the database it calls home certainly is.
So why is that? Why do so many big companies run Oracle on Linux? Well, think about who uses Oracle. We're talking about massive corporations, banks, governments, healthcare. They need 3 things above all else: stability, security, and cost-effectiveness. And enterprise Linux distros are legendary for their stability and rock-solid security. On top of that, you get to avoid paying for expensive Windows Server licenses, which at that scale saves a ton of money.
But, and this is a big but, here comes the plot twist. For decades, if you were doing T-SQL, you were in a Windows-only world, period.
But then, in 2016, Microsoft made this huge strategic shift and announced that SQL Server would officially run on Linux. This changed the game completely.
So what does that mean? It means that a standard T-SQL script, like the create procedure you see here, now works perfectly fine on a SQL Server instance that's running on Ubuntu or Red Hat or SUSE. Those old platform boundaries that we all took for granted, they're gone. It's also really important to remember that T-SQL and PL SQL are not alone here. This whole idea of tacking on programming features to SQL is a super common pattern. You'll find it in almost every major database system out there.
For example, the super popular open-source database PostgreSQL has its own version called PL/pgSQL. SAP HANA uses something called SQLScript, and IBM's DB2 uses SQL PL. The cool thing is, the concepts you learn in one, like variables, loops, handling exceptions, they are highly transferable to the others. The syntax is going to change, but the core ideas stay the same.
So let's just recap everything real quick. T-SQL is for SQL Server, and it now has great Linux support. PL SQL is for Oracle, and because of that, you're going to see it everywhere on Linux. And pgSQL is the go-to language for PostgreSQL. Each one is a really powerful tool, just built for its own specific ecosystem.
All right, I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. To help make sure all these key ideas really stick, I've got a couple of quick questions for you. Let's see what you've picked up. Okay, first one's pretty straightforward just to get us warmed up. What does T-SQL actually stand for, and which primary database system is it built for?
Question number 2 is a little more about the concept. Can you take your T-SQL code, copy it over, and just run it on an Oracle database? Think back to that C# versus Java analogy we talked about earlier.
And for the final question, this one's for you. In your day-to-day work, in the projects you're on right now, which of these two languages is more relevant? Are you in a Microsoft shop living in T-SQL? Or are you in the big enterprise Oracle world using PLSQL? Or, hey, maybe you're using something totally different like PL/pgSQL? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in.